Friday Night Racing
on Off the Ball.
Brought to you by Horse Racing Ireland. Love every racing moment. Visit hri.ie.
Friday Night Racing, myself and Johnny Ward are here in studio. It's good to be back in a confined environment, breathing your air. Johnny, I can think of nowhere else on planet Earth I'd rather be.
Congratulations on your duathlon this morning.
Well, thanks very much, Johnny. You're going to hear a lot more about that on the radio show this evening.
Battered Nathan, I believe.
We'll be rubbing it into to the old men, Nathan and
Adrian.
And Adrian in particular. Poor Adrian did his hamstring fairly early on. He soldiered on, though. It is a really bad injury. Anyway, look, we're breaking our own rules here. Normally we give people a good 6 months before we ask them to come back on, but Barry Geraghty was on very recently with us, and in the meantime there's been some big news. Barry Geraghty, congratulations on an amazing career and congratulations on calling time. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, Jeff. Thanks very much. It's been great. Very lucky to have had such good years. Lots of good horses to ride, so plenty to reflect on. But no, the time would come, and it sits very comfortably.
When did you decide? So I think we talked to you 3 or 4 weeks ago. Did you know then that whenever racing came back that actually you were probably finishing up anyway?
I was finished, yeah. But you know, you want to make the announcement. You want to get the timing right for yourself, I suppose. And the foreseeable future didn't really hold much hope as regards racing to go back and maybe Galway or something like that. So we had a few people around there last Saturday night, and as a belated 40th stroke Cheltenham celebration, and I got up and thanked everyone for coming and acknowledged the birthday and Cheltenham, and just said that was the last Cheltenham, and from that moment I was officially retired. And
was that bit emotional when you were telling other people? Because, you know, it's grand when you're in family situations like, look, I'm probably not going to go back. Yeah, fair enough, okay, are you sure? Yeah. But then when you actually tell people, that's real and it's hard to go back on.
Oh yeah, I knew. I was once it was out, it was committed. That was it. I'd spoke to JP, my boss, about 10 days beforehand about it. So once that conversation was had, that's really, you know, it was from then on it had happened. So I suppose that probably made it easier to stand up and say it in front of everyone. But I'd be lying to say that there wasn't a moment when I was up there. You know, it was a big step to finally make that final announcement.
How did the conversation with JP go?
Oh, good, but sure, you know the way JP is. He's a brilliant man. All he'd want is the best for you. And if that's how I felt, you know, he supported me fully in it, and was happy for me to get out on my own terms in one piece. It's what he'd want for you more than anything. You know, we hadn't discussed it before that. So it was, yeah, no, he was delighted. I was down, I'd lunch with him, JP and his wife Nora during the week, and you know, both were delighted for me, as I said, to get out in one piece, because they've been there, they've witnessed it. He's visited me in hospital when I've had broken legs, broken ribs, everything. So he's been very supportive all the way through, and he was fully supportive in this one.
I think we're coming to the end of a bit of a golden era of jockeys, like when you consider Paul Carberry, Tony McCoy, Ruby Walsh and Barry Geraghty are all retired now. You might remember before Punchestown last year I said this would be the last Punchestown for one of Barry Geraghty, Ruby Walsh or Davy Russell, or at least I think it will. And Ruby kind of had a pop at me and then subsequently retired at Punchestown. It worked out for Barry Geraghty because, as it turns out, there was no Punchestown the way things worked, but there's only Davy Russell of that generation left. And I'm just wondering for you, Barry, how long has this been in your mind? Because I remember you saying to me before, I've a good few years left to me, yes. And I don't think that was all that long ago, but I think when you're 40 and you're a national hunt jockey, you probably are maybe on borrowed time in general, are you?
Well, you are. You know, I've been saying it a good while now that I'm well down the back nine, and I have been well down the back nine. I'd suppose through the spring, well, go back to last year when I broke my leg in Aintree and I'm lying on the ground. And for the second time in 2 years, I'm saying, geez, I didn't see that one coming. You know, I'm lying there with my leg bent inwards, and I didn't see that coming. And then I'm thinking, is this where it ends? Because it was an ugly break and the worst I've had. So I was screaming for morphine, just to give me morphine to put me in a better place. And then I was happy that wasn't the end. Once the doctors weren't going to sign me off, I was coming back, and I got a Galway come back out as soon as the rumour mill started going. I wanted to quench that. So, but during the spring, you know, it's I've been very fortunate with a great career, lots of great horses for lots of great people and big winners. And yeah, you come to it that you think maybe, you know, it's probably not a bad note to go on if I'm going to go.
Does it get harder with time in that, you know, you can probably get over those bad injuries earlier in your career, but like Paul Carberry didn't want to retire. I remember he just got a horrible injury. He's kind of his last injury on a horse in one of the Kerry tracks, can't remember, but...
It was Listowel,
yeah.
He broke it. He broke his femur.
So does it get, I presume, just like, you know, from a normal person, and I'm not going to include jockeys as normal people, if you break your leg at 40 odd, like, it's obviously a big deal, but what's it like for a jockey if you're getting into your late 30s, and does it affect you mentally as well?
It's hard to say. I had a great gift of blocking everything out, so I generally blocked everything out, the broken leg was very hard. I had a frame, external frame on it for 14 weeks. And that was, there's no point saying otherwise, that was brutal. But at 5 months, I was standing in front of a surgeon and he said to me, so what do you want to do now? I said, let's go next week. And he said, give it another month. So at that stage, I was doing okay. Enda King was my physio in Santry. And he thought I made great progress for my age to get back to where I was. So, you know, I got the impression of Enda was beating the clock a little bit. So, yeah, no, I suppose I've had an average run over the last 5 years. I had a broken leg when I took the job first with JP back in 2015. I broke my arm twice in the meantime, and then my leg. I had ribs and a punctured lung in there as well too. So I missed 18 months of 5 years. And, you know, they're hard to keep coming back. And as I said, to be laying on the ground saying I didn't see that one coming, so I didn't want to see the next one coming.
The first Cheltenham that I ever watched was 2003 when you had a 5-timer, and this year you had a 5-timer. So what percentage of the 2003 jockey was Barry Geraghty in 2020?
I would have thought I got bet in more. I got bet on Iris's Gift in 2003. I didn't get beaten on anything this year.
Do you think, like, when was your peak as a jockey, or when is the peak of a national hunt jockey? Because I would imagine, in fairness, at 39, 40, you are probably slightly below your best, because just physically, maybe injuries take their toll. It's different for a flat jockey.
Yeah, but it's I've always described racing as being like high-speed chess. It's every move, from the drop of the flag, every move counts. So, albeit you mightn't take the falls as well, you see things coming, you read a race better. So I had 5 winners from 11 rides this year and no seconds. So to me, that was the best return I've had in Cheltenham.
I think as well, the last time we had you on, you were talking about winning a race this year at Cheltenham that you wouldn't have won a couple of years ago. That actually, it kind of feels like the answer is you were at your very best at the very end.
Well, I think only through experience. It brings you to that place. If you're still up for the job, you know, if you're not ducking the challenge and you're still going to the second last and the last as if they aren't there, then obviously there isn't an issue with your hunger. So, you know, it's timing. It goes back to timing, and that timing comes with experience. You will have a certain amount as you're young, but, you know, I'd a couple of tight finishes, Dame the Company, Sire de Burley and Champ, and all of those were trusting your instinct and timing.
Well, would the Champ ride, would that have been any different, we'll say, in 2003, for example?
I probably wouldn't have won on him in 2003, yeah. Whereas it was very similar to the Bobsert ride in the Gold Cup. So, yeah, no, it's easy for, it's probably, an older rider will always say that you're better with experience, and that you'll always stand at the end of your days and say, no, I was better with experience. But being honest, you know, I made better decisions. My decision making was better at 40 than it was at 25. You know, you would be cooler, you would be calmer, you'd be more collected. And as I said, for me, 5 winners from 11 rides in Cheltenham was, I didn't think I could improve much on what I got.
Do you have the same bottle, though, after all those injuries at 40 as at 25?
That's, well, you know, I won a Tinker Creek this year. Champ, I can't say, like, Puppy Power gave him as his lay at the meeting. So he said he didn't think he'd get round. And a lot of people thought the same. So I would have felt a bit like if you look at Dickie Johnson, you know, he is older than me. He rang me the other day. I said, you're madder than me, because he's still going at it. No, I don't think there was ever a bottle issue. They say when you get past 35 and you're not worrying about it, there's never an issue. And you could say the same for Paul, Ruby, AP, the same thing. And as I say, Dickie's still going. Leighton Aspel retired at 44, the same thing. So you don't see the fear, you don't see the danger. I think that's a lot of it, and that's how it's been.
It's kind of mad to me to think that you went into your last Cheltenham knowing that it's your last Cheltenham and put up.
Well, did you know, or was it? Did you have your decision made in March even?
I was, without deciding on it. I was looking at finishing up at the end of the season, whether that was going to be in Fairyhouse or Punchestown or somewhere like that. But I was looking. This was my last Cheltenham. I knew that. I went out in St. Roy. I knew this is my last ride in Cheltenham. So, and that's where the emotion, so much emotion when I won in Epitaph and winning in all those other horses. I showed more emotion in the week than I had done in previous years.
But even should have been reading into this, Ger, to be fair.
Well, even that is like the bit that you're saying. I'm cooler, I'm calmer, I'm making better decisions at 40, and in the meantime, in the back, there's this kind of raging emotion about this is my last time doing this. This is my last time in this race.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it. It wasn't raging emotion. It was more. This is what I love. This is like I was in the moment. You can be in no other place when you're riding in a race, only to be in the moment. You can't be elsewhere. So you've had people with troubled pasts, and once they get on a race course and they're in a race, boom, there's only one thing in their mind. So your judgment isn't clouded, but you hit the line. It's result.
That bit that you've just said about being in the moment, I was listening to a Jim Carrey interview and he was talking about being on stage and feeling fully alive, being in the moment. Yeah. And he actually said it's why we love sport. Sport is this perfect thing where you don't know what's going to happen because everybody is literally in the moment at that stage. Someone is chasing a ball or you're trying to get out in front of somebody over that last fence. And I always think that the sports people who have these long careers where they have really very grim down periods through injury or loss of form or loss of confidence or whatever, who come back, have an ability somehow to blink that away and go, doesn't matter, I'm going to get back to where I was. Where was that for you? That when did you know that living in the moment was the thing?
Well, it's always been the case. From as a kid riding a pony, when you're blitzing around the field at high speed, you are in that moment. You can't be anywhere else because you are watching everything, focused, concentrating, and it becomes a way of being. So it's like driving a car at high speeds, up to the speed limit or so, or if you're on a motorbike, I'm sure, it's the same. It's on the edge. When you're on the edge, you have to be fully aware of everything you're doing and everything that's happening. So it sharpens your senses. So you're going to race, every sense is alive, and that's how you're in the moment. There's no other thought.
When you were blitzing around the field on ponies as a kid, did you know you were good compared to the other kids?
I hoped it. I was doing okay, but that you're dreaming. You're dreaming someday of riding a Grand National, winning a Grand National. You're dreaming of Cheltenham. You're dreaming of everything, but they're still only dreams, and you're obviously hoping and hoping and hoping. And I was fortunate that I was able to fulfill those dreams. And
when did you start making it? When do you kind of pinpoint the first moment of going, okay, that's a break. I've got a break here. I'm getting on good horses. People are trusting me with them, and I've then delivered.
I suppose it happened early for me. We as kids we rode a lot of pony club hunting, everything, and it was always a progression. I started pony racing when I was about 13 or 14, and that took a little bit to get going, but I got going and did well at that. And I started with Noel Meade when I was 16, turning 17, and I rode my first winner within 4 months. I was second in the condition of Jockey's title that season, so I had 16 winners in after my first winner to my 16th were all in the space of 4 or 5 months. So I was, I hit the ground running when I got going.
The Noel Meade education must have been pretty beneficial to you as well, just in terms of just getting into a job like that straight away.
Oh, definitely, no doubt. And he's done a lot for Paul's career. Davy Condon, Sean Flanagan, Dennis O'Regan. Noel has been a brilliant school for jockeys. But he would give you great belief. He'd only believe in you if he thought you were worthy of the task. But he would give you belief. He'd give you confidence. He'd give you simple instructions, and he knows they mightn't go to plan. He would also trust you that if you want to go on plan B, go on plan B. And I suppose if plan B keeps failing, you'd probably find yourself on the back numbers. But if plan B keeps working, and there's respect grows in that. But Noel was a brilliant man to start with, educate, to give you belief. Very positive person. And from there to Jessica Harrington, who from the age of 17, I had my first ride for Jessie, and my second was a winner. From then until the end, Jessie has been a massive supporter.
It's funny, like talking to Shane Foley yesterday about his getting the job with Jessica Harrington and how absolutely buzzing he was to get this job with her. And I think it was actually the same day or the day before I'm talking to you, and you were telling me how great it was to get the ride on Moscow Flyer and how she could have put up somebody else. And I was kind of thinking, is this lad for real here, that she put up somebody other than Barry Geraghty? But you actually were quite young at the time, so it must have been a dream come true to be riding a horse like that.
Oh, completely. But for her to trust me with him at the time, I wouldn't have appreciated that. But in years later, when you see lads being taken off horses for more experienced riders, Jessie could have taken me off. I was 20 when I was winning the Moscow Flyer. I was 22 riding them in novice chases and getting unseated off them or him falling. So easily I could have been the scapegoat for those incidents. But no, Jessie always, she'd back you. Even St. John fell on New Year's Eve in Punchestown, and the first thing she said was the effing idiot, as in the horse. There was never a question. There was no, and that was her Gold Cup horse. And he jumped the hurdle perfect. He just stumbled and landed and fell. But never once has Jessie over the years ever looked to point a finger.
I suppose I didn't really know Ger at the time, this, as I was getting into racing, I didn't know any different, but they were special days really, weren't they, Barry? Because if you look back on Moscow Flyers videos now, even when he's winning at Tingle Creek, and a lot of the people there are English race goers, he had an amazing following because of the aura that he had. And then you went on to ride the likes of Max Joy and that sort of generation of great Irish hurdlers, and you had Well Chief and Azerty up on those horses at that time. And
well, let's talk about Moscow Flyer, because I'm looking over at the books there, and it's Mourinho, Colin Cooper, Anthony Foley and Moscow Flyer are the books that are randomly on the bookshelf over there. Not that many horses get books written about them, and books that people are going to buy and read. So, what was so special about Moscow Flyer that made this connection with the public? And
also, I suppose that you had Brave Inca, and we'll say with those horses, you had different owners, you had kind of trainers that wouldn't necessarily have that many Cheltenham winners. And I suppose Barry Moscow had an absolute character and swagger about him that just people absolutely loved him.
Well, most importantly, he was a class act. He went 4 full years unbeaten as a chaser.
When he didn't fall.
When he didn't fall. So every time he stood up, he won for 4 years. And that was from Punchestown in the Grade 1 champion hurdle to 4 years later getting beaten by Rat Garbeau in the Grade 1 2-mile chase. So every other occasion he won, or else he was on the ground or I was on the ground. So, he was a superstar. But I'd suppose maybe his checkered history probably appealed to people too, because he had his faults, he had his demons, if you like. So but he was an amazing horse and a brilliant horse to get. And to get a flagship horse like that early in your career, that doesn't happen too often, And to get him at that time, he put me on the top table.
And at a time when sort of, Irish winners at Cheltenham were still, we take it for granted now, but in those days, we weren't winning many Gold Cups, and he became that sort of banker material, even running against really good British horses. It was like this. You can just imagine the Irish punter going over the night before, just buzzing to watch Moscow Flyer.
Yeah, definitely. And the Tingle Creek, his second Tingle Creek, where he beat Azerty up in Well Chief, is probably, I'd say, the best race I've ridden in, as it does. Those clashes don't usually live up to expectations, and they did. And he won that day with a near pricked. So he had more in the tank. He was a real superstar.
And you looking around your shoulder turning into the straight. I remember even Simon Hole commentating about that now, and just this. It wasn't as if you were hard on the bridle or anything, but it was just one of these amazing moments in a race when if you've backed Moscow Flyer, you're like, here we go.
Yeah, well, I knew he wouldn't do much in front, so I was egging the lads to come on, have a go. I didn't want to be left out there on my own and Moscow take his eye off the second last and drop a foot into the middle of it. So I was there and the lads to come and have a go.
We're Friday Night Racing here, brought to you by Horse Racing Ireland. Love every racing moment. Visit hri.ie or follow the new Twitter account at HRI Racing. Barry Geraghty is our guest this week. Barry, you won RTE Sports Personality of the Year that year as well, I think. Is that right? So that's like a very young age to win an accolade. That I was looking back, I think the only other jockey who's ever won it is AP, and that's kind of geez, AP's never won this and it's the end of his career, we better give it to him. Was that a big deal at the time? Was it something that you kind of recognised as like a crossover moment for the sport?
I was only 23. I had 5 when I was in Cheltenham and won the English Grand National. So it was an amazing thing to get. And no, I did appreciate it at the time, but probably didn't realise, its significance outside of it, because I wouldn't, the fact that the jockey had won it before, you're probably a bit young to really appreciate things like that. But of the award itself, it was a brilliant one to get.
Yeah, and I suppose as well when you think about it, I was even looking at a horse that's run at the weekend, and he's a half brother to Johannes Vermeer, or brother to Johannes Vermeer, and I had to look at Ireland in that particular year, 2017. 3 different trainers had the first, second, and third in the Melbourne Cup. And do you think that is racing's place in Irish society almost slightly like not appreciated outside the sport? Because when you think of the achievements that racing constantly produces, it's like, I know we're a slightly peripheral sport, but I don't know if we give ourselves the credit we deserve at times.
It's hard to say. You could say that, but we're so used to success. With Aidan O'Brien on the flat, with Willie Mullins, Jesse, Gordon, everyone over jumps. It's kind of, we're very familiar with it, and it probably doesn't. It's not as big a shock to the system as it would be for other sports to achieve on a world stage.
Would you be confident about racing going forward as well? Have you seen changes in terms of we've obviously animal rights kind of issues have come up from time to time, and the use of the whip and all that, and even funding of racing in Britain. We see Ed Vaughan pulling out of training this week. Are you confident about the sport going forward?
Well, you can never be confident. Well, I suppose you can never take it for granted. But no, the sport is in a great place. It is very much self-sufficient, if you like, via the betting industry. If racing wasn't there, betting will be way down. So the revenue return from betting will be way down too. So I think racing, it covers itself well in that respect. And the amount of employment in racing, the spin-off from everything that goes on is massive. So it's a huge industry. It's great that it's back going again behind closed doors. But racing is a national sport. I think anyone in the country is only 1 or 2 generations from someone who worked with a horse or has some involvement.
Can I ask you about the weigh room during that period of time where there are such legendary figures, and with that comes a dynamic that's interesting, where you're all up against each other and you're all trying to get the best horses, and you all have associations with certain trainers. How do you keep the friendships and at the same time try and slit each other's throats, metaphorically, in the race every half an hour?
Well, we all respect each other insofar as at what stage you can ask the question during a race. For a little bit of room, a little bit of light. If you want to get a better view of a fence because you have no view at all, I give Ruby or Paul a shout, or Puppy or whoever it be. They know, right, give Barry a bit of room, Barry's going to give him back a bit of room tomorrow. So it works like that. But there comes a point in the race in the last half mile where you don't ask, because now you're getting into the business end. So it's just that mutual respect, and you know how far you can push it. You know how much you can squeeze a fella, the line you cross. Not to cross it. And that's all experience too. And when you're a young lad and you appear on the scene, you don't know those lines, and you don't be long about learning.
And so you cross the line, I presume, early on. Do you cross the line at any point later on and you think, actually, you know what, today is going to be my day? Are there some times where you actually say, I don't care about the friendship for the next hour, and I'm sure we'll all be able to make up afterwards? Yeah,
but it's very rare, actually, that, if you ride a tight race, keep it tight, you find margins, you want to cut everything as fine as you can. If you do your job well enough, you don't need to make a dirty manoeuvre. If you make a dirty manoeuvre, it's probably as counterproductive for yourself, because you're getting caught up in a bit of a scuffle with another horse. So your horse is losing energy and speed at the time while you're bumping off someone else than the fella who's getting a clear run around you. So you don't want to get stopped. You don't want to get checked. You want to keep that clean run going, your horse nice and relaxed. You don't need to be interfering with someone else, because by doing that, you're actually interfering with your own horse.
It's fair enough. I guess it's a long-term business decision you're making as well, not to become somebody who's like that.
It's a way, it's a way of life. And, there is certain lads who wouldn't, walk the same line. And they're known for it, and you know where you stand. But likewise, when you get the call, you're less likely to oblige.
Can I ask you about the relationship with JP? Like, how much information, because, even it sounds like from a very early stage, you were given a lot of information back to trainers and articulating exactly what you thought was going to be plan B in case plan A didn't work. When you're having conversations with an owner who obviously knows as much about racing and has so much material to draw on historically, what are those conversations actually like? How much detail do you get into?
It would depend. Sometimes it could be great detail. Other times it could be very simple. And often the case, JP, it'd say to you, know best, because he knows just to trust you. And you're in the position for a reason, because you've earned that trust, I suppose. But especially in Cheltenham, he's not going to cloud your opinion with anything major. It'll be a simple little one-liner, and it'll generally be, best.
Do you think there's a need for the retained jockey for an owner now? Like, obviously, Gigginstown kind of had their few goes at it and then sort of abandoned the idea. Personally, I don't really see the need for it. I think, for example, JP now, if he is in a situation, and I presume he's different jockeys in the two different jurisdictions, but like, is this going to continue in terms of an owner having a retained jockey, or do you think like the likes of JP will say, well, Richard Johnson can ride that, Aidan Coleman can ride that, Mark Walsh can ride that, for example?
It depends. It's a personal choice, and I suppose before me, AP rode for JP for 10 years, so he's a direct line of contact with the man who's riding the bulk of his horses, and it was the same for me for 5 years. So if you have different riders, there probably isn't as much communication maybe, so it's a personal choice really. So I'm not sure which way JP is going to go forward, but I'm sure he'll make the right decision.
It sounds like it's almost on the lesser exposed horses that those conversations are deeper, and it kind of races that we take less interest in, that are the off-Broadway races, where you're actually giving this feedback so that information gets back into the mainframe computer, where everybody can kind of, okay, well, this is what we've learned today, and you can download the information to the trainer and the owner.
Yeah, it is, but it's across the board. Like, sometimes there's, horses that are very straightforward, that there isn't much to report back, and, everyone knows where they stand. But then there's other days you could ride that horse and say, something, whatever, there might be some little bit of information, something happened, you might just feel you might want better ground, you might want further. You never stop learning. And it's the same with a horse, you never stop learning about them. And they do change at time. They'll get slower, definitely not faster. They get slower. They can develop issues with age. There could be a little niggling injury there, and he's just feeling it, and he's not as happy. He doesn't jump as well. So there's always little things, to be dealt with. But that's the same in any yard. When I was riding first jockey for Nicky, it was the same thing. You would ring him every day after racing if he wasn't with you. And you're constantly reporting back to your trainer or your owner, whoever is your boss, and it's everything works off information. And it's the same at home when the gallops in the morning or the schooling ground. It's all information, and because the horse can't speak himself, you're doing the talking for him.
We're obviously talking to Ger there before the show, because he's done this duathlon thing and he's gotten into training and all that. I think that looks like a treadmill behind you there. What do you do now at this moment? Because you've had 25 years of being a professional athlete, having to get up every morning early, having to be fit, having to work hard basically, and the stuff that people don't see. What do you do now? Do you say, I'm going to just put the feet up and enjoy my retirement, play golf? Or do you say, no, I'm going to, stay healthy, continue to exercise and plan for the chapter that's ahead?
I will definitely stay healthy. I'm not exercising as hard as I was because I made a choice about 2 months ago. I was running up the field and I said to Paul afterwards, I said, geez, I was blowing hard after that.
Blowing hard post-run.
Yeah, and I said I might start doing a bit of running. And then I thought, you know what? I need to unwind a little bit because it's only now having, and the lockdown has worked well as regards my retirement because I've had time away and time to relax and take stock and time with the family and switch off, that it's left me in a more relaxed situation or position. And no, so I'm not running because I'm happy just to be going at an easier pace, not to be going, with the adrenaline rush that would be the normal. I'm working hard. I have young horses here, so I'm busy with those. I'm riding out, but I'm definitely not in training. But I haven't put on much weight because I'm busy. I'm active. But I'm definitely I haven't turned into a snack box junkie or anything like that.
Not yet, anyway. But like when you listen to Pat Smullen saying that, as much as when he got his cancer diagnosis, it was absolutely horrific. He said the one thing is it actually made me appreciate what this stuff that I just didn't really take. I suppose I took for granted because Pat was so driven as a jockey that his family time was probably eroded as a consequence of just his determination and his dedication to the job. And I suppose for you've young kids, you're going out in one piece, and this isn't something like, I know you're obviously going to be disappointed, but this is something to be celebrated, that you're going out in one piece, you've had a great career, and you have your family now there with you.
Hey, that's how we felt. We celebrated it on Saturday night. There was no tear shed. It was a joyous occasion, and it still has been, and it hasn't. There hasn't been a day since where I've gone, I haven't doubted, because it's, as I say, it sits comfortably with me. I suppose I was, especially in England, I could be gone 3 or 4 or 5 days a week in England. But when I would come home, it would be locked the front door and time at home. So, albeit racing took me away and kept me away from the family, it was only when I was away that I was away. I'd come home and I would enjoy our time here.
You owned a pub in the past, didn't you?
I did. Myself and Barry Callahan,
yeah.
Who played for Meade back in '97 and '99. We bought a pub together. I actually wrote my first winner for Barry's dad in '97, and we bought a pub together in Kells. We had it for a couple of years, and then Barry said he'd buy me out before we fell out because I wasn't around enough. I was, the plan was every odd weekend, but I was in England every weekend, so. He bought me out, and that was how it went. But yeah, I was there for a while, and it was an itch scratched, if you like.
I guess I'm just wondering, like, would you have interest now outside of the game itself? I know you mentioned obviously you bred Bobsworth and sold him on, and you've young horses. So I suppose is training going to be on the agenda, or are you going to go down the Charlie Chalk route and buy a load of boozers?
No, neither really. No, as I said, the pub is an itch scratch. So it was fun, but it wouldn't be. That's for someone who's fully committed to that. It's not my way. No, I've a nice few young horses, and I've enjoyed trading away in those. We had Brain Power here as a youngster and sold them on, and some other nice horses as well, and obviously Bobsworth. But no, I enjoy that, and we'll keep going at that. Maybe there's a little bit of media work there for me. I've an easy approach as regards it. I'm not looking to chase down the next big thing. I have enough going on at home with the young horses I have to keep me active and to keep me busy.
I've got some good questions actually. Could you bring up the media? Sean, who's watching on YouTube, says, what's Barry's post-racing media personality going to be like? Because Ruby is obviously the bad cop. Is Barry going to be the friendlier face of racing punditry?
Maybe, but sure. I suppose time will tell. I don't know, but I wouldn't. I wouldn't be going for the juggler the whole time anyway. I'd be a little bit maybe more sympathetic.
It is an interesting one though, because like we'll say Fran Berry's on today on Racing TV. I think Fran has taken to it really well. Ruby was kind of like effectively a natural when he was doing it for RTE anyway, but at the same time you're kind of compelled, if you're doing your job properly, you're compelled to criticise a jockey because your buddy has given a horse a bad ride. So are you kind of conscious of that as well, that like if you're pally with all these lads, it doesn't necessarily work if you just you can't call a spade a spade?
Yeah, well, I think Fran is brilliant and is really growing into it. But you can criticise without, as I say, going for the juggler and going for town. Going to town on a fella. We've all been there, and I would be very sympathetic towards a lad making a mistake, because it can be as simple as missing a turn on the motorway, and that happens anyone at any time.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Patrick says, I believe Barry never really struggled with his weight, but what luxury dinners will he be enjoying that he couldn't before? Not snack boxes, so something else.
I never struggled with my weight because I suppose I had I'm lucky to be married to a nutritionist, so that's been brilliant. Paul has done really well for me there, and eating the right food, and I still would be that way, but I suppose I exercised, and that I could afford to eat. So I never starved myself. I'd be cranky if I was starving. So I'd rather eat and run or work. So although I'm not running, I'm doing enough to justify my dinner anyway. So
what is this meat you're going to eat though?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, no,
because you've never denied it.
No, I've never denied it, so I don't have a longing for it. Exactly.
What first attracted you to the nutritionist Paula, who was able to really help your career? It's the Paul Daniel question. But were you like bad with your meals until actually somebody had a quiet word who also happened to end up being your wife?
Well, like, it wasn't that, like, he wasn't that it was 50-50 and then she said, I'm a nutritionist, and he said, oh, grand, I'll bring you on a date. So I don't think that's how it works.
She wasn't a nutritionist at the time. She studied that afterwards. But no, it definitely opened my eyes. But my diet probably wasn't too bad. I would generally, I've more of a savoury tooth than sweet, so I'd go for a starter rather than dessert. So I generally wasn't too bad now. I'd say my lifestyle was probably more of an issue than my diet, if you like.
What are you alluding to there?
I'd say having too much of a good time at a weekend maybe, or on a Sunday night. But no, my weight was always consistent, reasonably consistent. Like, I would be 10.9 or 10.10 was my 10.8. That was my fit weight. So I could get down to 10.4, drop 6-7 pounds. But I would always be trading. Even after a few days of binging, I wouldn't 10-12 would be very heavy. So I wouldn't get very heavy, but it was hard work to get it back down to that 10.2 to right at 10.4. So it didn't fluctuate much over the years.
Just talking about the lifestyle stuff, like, you can see how easy it is for so many people who get success very early on to go off the rails. Like, it's a fairly natural thing. People are buying you pints all the time. You get a bit of fame, you get a bit of money, and you're still a child, essentially, in your early 20s when you've got no responsibilities and the repercussions aren't really that serious. I can see that you kind of probably do need to grow out of that at some point.
Yeah, but I think it's a different world we're living in now. Like, back then, across the board in all sport, you read Roy Keane's book. When I started racing, there was the stories of previous generations and the way things were done then. But I was there for the tail end of, a generation who enjoyed themselves as well. So I suppose I'm lucky to have seen both sides of it. The fellas who are riding now, the younger fellas, wouldn't appreciate what happened before and how wild they were. But they were great times. Like, Jason Titley texted me during the week congratulating me, and we were having a bit of fun and texting over and back, and the mad times they were, and they were. But it was good to have a taste of both.
And it's good that social media didn't exist and you got away with it all too. That's the other side of it.
It's probably the death nail in the good times.
It is. Last question for now from one of our listeners. John Paul by text wants to know your single best and your single worst day in racing. Let's start with the worst so we can finish with the best. What was the worst day?
Oh, the broken leg in Aintree, no doubt. That was when you're looking down and your leg is 2 inches above your ankle, has just turned left. So it was actually a BBC ambulance programme, had a few minutes of it there recently. That was the worst. And the best was probably in the exact same spot at the back of the third last in Aintree in 2003 on Monty's Pass, when I'm there with an eerie silence and you're just thinking I'm on the verge of winning the biggest race in the world.
That's pretty mad, yeah. Same spot.
Yeah. Same spot. So yeah, best and worst.
So there's silence. There's like a sense in your ears. It begins to ring, and it's like, that's not the crowd. That's me winning.
So you're just coming back onto the racecourse off the national track, if you like. So you're far enough away from the stands. There's no commentary and there's no crowds in the area. So I'm jumping the third last. I have one horse in front of me. You can hear there's nothing but an earshot. And I'm absolutely cantering. I'm in third gear, and you're just about to win the Grand National. So that's that was probably the best moment of my career.
I was in college in Whitehall at the time and watched that race in the bookies, and a load of people had backed him because the owner owned bingo halls, and there's a bingo hall in Whitehall, and he told all the old people to back Monty's Pass, and he'd been telling them for weeks, I think, at this stage, at all prices down. So you were the flavour of the month in Whitehall anyway.
Yeah, Mike Futter.
That's right.
And is the man's name, great man, and he backed him in. He backed him from all prices, and he took a lot of money off him.
He had a huge amount of money, like a legendary amount of money on the horse. Did you have any idea before the race takes off that, like, is he one of those owners that comes over and says, listen, I don't want to put any extra pressure on you here, but I've got about £5 million on it?
Well, I knew he stood to win a lot of money, but, I was in those positions. You're focused on what you want to achieve for yourself. So Mike wins if I win, Mike loses if I lose, but, it's a disappointment for me. So it was always... you would like to win for someone, but you're also, if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out for you. So I was probably selfish enough to have my own interest first.
Fair enough. Listen, it is an absolutely sensational career that you've put down, and I actually really think that you're going to be a brilliant media analyst as well, just as a clear understanding of exactly why things happen and an ability to communicate that in a way that's not very common. So enjoy the downtime and not running and whatever good meals are coming your way, but I really look forward to seeing you on screens and talking about racing again really soon.
Cheers, Ger. Thank you. Thanks, Johnny.
Thanks, Barry. Top man.
It's Barry Geraghty there, an absolute legend.
Yeah, I agree with you as well. He's you got to remember, a lot of jockeys are not well educated. A lot of them don't get beyond the junior certs, and genuinely they're quite good at communicating in ways, but they do struggle in other ways. But Barry was always like a little bit different for me. He was just somebody that was really easy to talk to, and I'm not saying the fact that he owned a pub is something that really matters, but he did think a little bit outside the box, could speak to you about stuff that didn't involve racing as well, and some pundits take to it afterwards. I think he's going to be an absolute natural. All
right, Friday Night Racing is brought to you by Horse Racing Ireland. Let's look back at last week. It was a third place for Johnny's chosen Tanseek. I wasn't here last week. Tanseek.
Yeah, it was like 33 to 1 into 10 to 1 or something like that. Ran a good race. It's been one of those runs at the moment. I do tipping on racing TV as well. If I could do the good weekend, to be honest.
Was third not a good each way?
Yeah, it was.
Back at each way.
It was good. I think I'm a kind of a all duck or no dinner type operative.
It turns out that like half a dinner is better than no dinner. That's just a little bit of friendly advice. Some food better than no food.
That's actually very true. Particularly when you're starved. Like us,
and we are starved.
Yeah, starved. But it's the Oaks weekend.
This money is all for the Tote Irish Injured Jockeys Fund, and we are another week at a total of 1,540, most of which was built up during the lockdown when they were just giving us 100 quid a week out of the goodness of their hearts for charity. This week
we need to mention that bit actually, yeah, because it sounds better otherwise.
This week there is another €100 Tote bet to try and add to the Injured Jockeys tally. Yesterday saw Tote announce changes for account holders coming up in August, and ask anybody with a Tote account to log on to the tote.com/change for more information. Looks like a pretty exciting time for them with loads more markets on offer as well. So what are we looking at?
Yeah, I suppose a couple of things. I just wanted to mention as well that the Ballyhane Stakes at Naas is going to be the most valuable 2-year-old race run in Ireland this year, which is a big deal for Naas in terms of that track. Probably your local track, or the Curragh?
Curragh's much closer.
Yeah. But Naas is a fantastic track, massive fan of it, and they've done great work there.
It's a full 5 miles closer, I'd say. Sorry, I'd say much closer.
Well, there we are. But tomorrow, I'm just looking for the time of the race here, because it is the first race at Curragh. The horse's name is Wembley. Now, if you call a horse Wembley, John Magner's wife Sue.
We've been here before, where you're picking horses on the basis of the name. It was like Love.
I know it sounds
like Love has to win, because no one's going to call a horse Love.
I know it won as well. I know it sounds like complete mug talk, but I imagine they probably did want to call a decent horse Wembley. But Wembley is going to be very, very smart. He ran a brilliant race first time out. I'm intrigued as to what price this horse will be in the 4:15 tomorrow. He's the brother to Johannes Vermeer that was placed in the Melbourne Cup, which would obviously imply that he will want more distance. But his debut run was so good, I'd be pretty shocked if he were beaten, and you might get 2 to 1 maybe. And that's in the 4:15. So it's like a matinee meeting at Curragh. It's a lovely kind of. Fortunately, you can't be there, but it's like you can get much of your day's work done and so forth. And the first race at 4:15 into the Oaks. I think the timing of these meetings is kind of to tie in with TV, which is fair enough. But the first race has the best bet, I think, on the card.
Okay, talk to us about the Oaks. What do you expect to happen?
Yeah, this is like, so essentially the horses that went to, it's a strange race in that, and the 3 Irish horses that went over to run in the French Oaks, none of them is running here, but for some reason, and neither is Love, who bolted up at Epsom. But I don't think, as much as it's a lesser race for that, I don't think it's actually, I think it's still a very interesting Oaks, and maybe you get the chance for the other horses to kind of strut their stuff. I think we're at 7:15. So Innes Simon and Cayenne Pepper are going to dispute favouritism, something like that. Innes Simon was second to Love. She was beaten 9 lengths by her, so she's obviously vulnerable in a way. But Laburnum, who was my really strong tip here 2 weeks ago, was beaten a neck on the day, which is kind of slightly typical of what's happening. Declan McDonough is riding her. She's to take a step forward, but I'm a massive fan of her. I think she's a good each way chance, 10 or 12 to 1. And it's the dead 8 runners as well. It's actually fascinating enough, folks, for all that there are 4 horses who could be running in it, and Albina, if you count her, 5 who are not in it, not there. But at the same time, it's still intriguing.
So you still think Laburnum, you're not offside?
No, she was touched off by Even So, but Even So is considered good enough to run in this race. She ran very well in the Guineas. That form's working out great, and she'd loads of experience. Laburnum had come just out of a maiden. It was a really good run, and if she can progress another little bit, I think she'll run thereabouts.
Okay, because we weren't sure about how form was going to undulate over the course of
It's a strange year, you know.
So what's happening?
So, a lot of, like, Laburnum and Even So ran 2 weeks ago. You don't normally run in a trial for a classic 2 weeks beforehand, and all these rules have necessarily been broken because they've compressed the season into sort of what happens normally in 3 months has been happening in 1.
Yeah.
So basically they've just had to run the horses, probably train them a bit different, just ease off them. They don't have time to step it up as much. I know some punters are kind of finding it a tough year. I don't know if that's related or not. Punters are actually getting that tote introduction of guaranteed odds is a good thing for the punters. Punters are getting very good prices on the show at the moment, very tight margins. So there's that, but there's also the fact that it's a bit of a strange year. So it's kind of, I know some punters aren't having a great run of it, but trainers have just had to adjust and do different things.
So the rest of the world is finding that having to reassess everything that you've done because you've done it because of tradition has been a really fast way of accelerating change. Loads more people are moving online all of a sudden to do all sorts of little small bits of shopping that you never thought. Like local off license, suddenly you order on the way home, you pick it up, and away you go. It's absolutely sensational. It's great. What's happening in terms of our trainers suddenly deciding, actually, you know what? If I have a tune-up race 2 weeks out from a classic, it's perfect because I get to the classic in a way that if it's 4 weeks, the hurling championship, if you win the Munster Hurling Championship traditionally over the last decade and a half, it's been no good for you because you've got too long. They give you an extra week off, and actually the team coming through the back door, they're tuned up and they're playing.
Absolutely,
really well.
yeah.
Is it too early yet for any of that?
This is a stupid question, stupid response, but a trainer would be better served to answer that. What I would say is it would be different from one horse to another, but like Innes Simon, who runs in the Oaks, she went from winning a maiden straight into Royal Ascot. She then was rushed to run at Epsom, and now she's coming back again. So I was talking to an English guy during the week, and he's like, I can't believe Innes Simon is running. But I was like, well, Peaceful ran last weekend. Love ran in Epsom the previous day or whatever, and also like she would win this race, so it doesn't really add anything to her. So they're trying to give like Ennis time in her day in the sun, but her preparation to run in those 3 sort of real top class races in quick succession is unusual. She's able to take it because she's just very hardy. She's a Galileo, but a lot of horses with lesser sort of pedigrees or constitution would not be able to stand up to this. And right. I'd say there's also an element of trainers are like, but we don't really have much choice here. We have to run them and see what happens. But it is a bit strange.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm asking. If there's actually going to be some trainers who go, a horse that profiles in a certain way, it turns out we can do this. This new way of business, and actually it's going to have a knock-on impact, which is positive. And I suppose the data isn't out. The one thing I was kind of interested in, and I'm not asking you to know this, but are the times any different in terms of how fast these races are being run? I realise that this is a part of the world where the time is less important than it would be, say, in American racing, for example. But maybe at the end of this flat season, it's going to be really interesting to see, well, horses that peaked in the middle of the season ran times exactly that they would have done in any season.
Well, that's interesting now. Like, certainly the ground would have been a big factor earlier in the season because there'd been a drought, so the ground was fast. But in terms of horses having a back-end campaign who are running every second day at the moment, you're going to have to ease off them, because you know, Seeds of Stars won 6 Group 1s as a 3-year-old. Nobody does that, and you can't, like, his coat was gone at Longchamp, but he still ran freely, and he still won the Arc, but he was a complete freak. You're going to have to ease off the horses, because they can go sour mentally or physically if you're going to keep going with them. But you know, we've had that very I think it's been fantastic in ways. I'm disappointed I can't go racing, but because racing had been off for so long, we have this amazingly good racing almost every second day. We've a listed race or something, and it's really enjoyable. Like, I was doing tipping for the weekend. There were 4 meetings Saturday and Sunday. There's so much going on.
Yeah.
And it's been bizarre, but it's actually been pretty class for punters in many ways. So I've run out of excuses, I suppose.
All right, Johnny, good stuff. Friday Night Racing on Off the Ball is brought to you by Horse Racing Ireland. Love every racing moment. Visit hri.ie. We stream it live every Friday afternoon at 3 o'clock on the OTB Sports app. Just search OTB Sports in the App Store, and you can download that, and you can click the personalised button and make sure that horse racing is the #1 thing that appears in your feed there. And we obviously broadcast live. Rebroadcast every Friday evening on News Talk on Off the Ball as well. We'll see you next Friday. Best of luck.
Friday Night Racing
on Off the Ball.
Brought to you by Horse Racing Ireland. Love every racing moment. Visit hri.ie.